Hi there, my name is Troels, and in this video we're going to take a deep look and walkthrough of my official demo for our Century Solo Brass. Century Solo Brass contains over 100 gigabytes, and I think we managed to compress that down to like 46 gigabytes of absolutely exquisitely sampled hyper-realistic solo brass. We have solo French horn, we have solo trumpets, we have solo Flugelhorn, which is a predominant part of this demo. We also got solo trombone, solo bass trombone, solo Cimbasso, and solo Tuba. So you have a collection of all the main suspects when it comes to solo brass, and there's really no way to describe this library in words. I'm gonna play this demo in its full length to start with, and then I'm gonna isolate different parts of it. And I should also mention that this demo also contains samples from both Century Solo Brass, but also from our Century String collection. We actually have two different volumes of strings coming out, one covering traditional orchestral strings, both for first, second violin, violas, cellos, and basses, and then the same concept but for sodinos, meaning muted strings. And in this demo in particular, and this goes for a lot of motion picture scoring, sodinos are really the go-to, and they've sort of been an afterthought in sampling for many years. People have sort of tried to just EQ them or use convolutions or whatever, but we actually approached them with the same level of deep sampling as we've approached everything else in Century. So you have a full collection of regular strings and a full collection of sodino strings with legatos and everything else that you could possibly think of. And in this demo, it's predominantly the sodino strings you're going to be listening to in there. And you're really going to hear them here in the beginning of the demo. And the demo also features a little bit of our Century Harps and Century Ostinato collection, which is also a part of the Century family. But that's me talking. Why don't we just get into the demo? I'm going to play it here in its full length, and then I'm going to start isolating different parts, and we're going to look particularly closely at the Century Solo Brass parts. But let's just get started. All right, let me bring in the Flugelhorn here and let's isolate it and listen to it a little bit standalone. This is just a legato articulation, and as you can see here when you double click, you have so much material. You have different types of short notes, and this is a concept that goes across Century, both in terms of having fanfare-oriented short notes, but also standard articulations such as staccato. We also have soaring arcs and other types of arcs, which is one of the beautiful things about Century. The arcs are different than they were in Adagio and Anthology in the sense that when you play an arc in Century, it actually has multiple arcs built into it. And that's something we're going to be covering in great lengths, but essentially when you load an arc, you can control the length and the dynamics of it, meaning that there are many different sample sets loaded in the same arc. One of the feedback points we got for Adagio is that people love the arcs, but they wanted more control over them, so you certainly have that. But for now, let's just listen to the legato here with the Flugelhorn. And it's so nimble to play. Let me just play something totally in live here on the keys, so you can get a feeling for how fluent it is. I'll just play one of the Star Wars themes, and just right now here. Check out how fluent it is when you go through the dynamics of the instrument. You don't get a lot of those sort of crossfade bumps that you're used to. Everything is super smooth, and it's really one of the sort of next-gen features of when you use Century. It's not only that it sounds so damn human and alive and with true emotion, but it's also the fluency of playing articulations. A subtle variation of the Star Wars theme. But it's also cool because it's not only that it's so expressive, you can actually do really fast stuff as well. And if you notice here, we have the speed button that allows you to adjust the speed of how fast you want to play. Let me try to play something a little slower here. Let's turn it down and I'll play slow, and then I'll try to turn it up and play a faster phrase as well. And obviously I have a ton of Valhalla reverb on the Flugelhorn. Let me try to isolate it here and play it with the different microphone positions without any reverb at all, so you can hear what they sound like. One of the beautiful things about Century is that everything is recorded in center, meaning that you can absolutely place the instrument in any way you want in the panoramic field. We hear more and more soundtracks nowadays where people are playing more around with panning, so you're not forced to a 400-year-old convention of what panning should be like. But because we have so many different microphones and we have two different types of convolutions here, and we have multiple hall variations inside of the convolutions, you can do panning to the end of days. You also have panning controls down here. But we really wanted Century to offer you full control, both in terms of the dryness and wetness of the samples, We actually did room casting for Century in terms of finding the right room that would give us the bleed and natural wetness, but also allow us to do super dry samples at the same time. So one of the wonders of Century is not just the fluency of it, all the unique articulations, but it's also the ability to control your microphone positions, whether you want it completely dry, studio dry, or you want it hall wet, and the ability to adjust where you want it in the panoramic field and on the stage. And it is very, very dry on the spot mics here. Let's just add a little bit of reverb to it here to show you how you can also use this control here. So I'm gonna take one of our hall reverbs here, put the mix up to like 45% maybe. Let's try it again here. Yeah, it's a little better that way. Let's listen to the Decca here as well. And obviously you can combine both Decca, close and wide here, but let me just isolate the Decca for now. And the white microphone here. And obviously you can combine the microphones as well. Let's take a little bit of the white, the Decca and the close here and see if we can do a sweet mix. But in the case of the demo, I actually only used a mixed microphone position for all the instruments. I think it's a good indicator of what the library can do. So if you want to go in and be hardcore engineering like here, you can do that with all the microphones. The strings actually have up to 6 microphones. But in the case of this demo here, and for most things that I do, I tend to go with the mixed. It's easier on the computer. You can see this is just merely 58 megabytes for the legato alone here. And it does what it needs to do. Next up is our French horn. And this is probably my favorite French horn sample of all time when it comes to solo horn. If you ever wanted that perfect sample that can do the dual sunsets of Star Wars, this is really the one here. And one of the unique aspects is not just the legato and the wealth of articulations here. You can see we have both staccatissimo, fanfare shorts, different ways of approaching those really, really short notes. We have maccatos with short attack, we have short maccatos, soaring short, soaring long, and each of these actually have multiple sample sets in terms of speeds. You have every type of rip, double tongue, triple tongue, legato, sustain, all that stuff here. You also have another subset of muted articulations here. But what's so beautiful about it, it's not only that you have all the articulations here, but it's also that you have vibrato control. You can actually control the intensity of the vibrato, and this goes for all the instruments like trumpets and all those instruments where you really use vibrato to express yourself on top of all the smooth dynamics here. I'm just going to bring in a clean version here so we don't get any Valhalla shimmer over it. This is completely dry, solo French horn, just using the mixed microphone here. And see what happens when we dial in the vibrato here. You get a more sort of nervous, fragile sound to the horn. But the solo French horn also sounds really, really awesome with a beautiful Valhalla shimmer, which is a reverb on top of it. Let me just play this part here. So it can be incredibly gentle like we just heard and very sensitive, but it can also be more strong and forte. And one of the beautiful things is that when you ride through the dynamics of the instrument, you don't get the bumps, you don't get the legato bumps. You can do fluent expression for piano pianissimo up to forte fortissimo with the instrument. And if you notice, you'll see I have the vibrato midway here. I actually love that sound, particularly when it burns to a little more, to add a little bit of vibrato in it. It gives a little more sort of emotional intention in the sound. Let me play this part here again, but in full context to the rest of the piece. And as you can see in the demo, I'm constantly writing both dynamics and expressions CC1 and CC11, and that's just vital for using the libraries the right way. So always make sure that you have those two assigned to your sliders. Ideally, sliders is hard to do with knobs, and you can't really do it on a mod wheel. You want to have these two separated. So I always have two sliders, one for dynamics and one for expression. And then on top of that, if you really want to get into the sort of hyper-realistic parts of using these libraries, you both use dynamics, expression, but you can also assign CCs to speed, meaning that when you play slow, you want to have it down here. It's kind of like I'm doing in the piece, but if you really want to go fast, you can dial it up. And this works in real time as well. And on top of that, you also got vibrato control, and of course stuff like legato volume and all that stuff. But imagine how much you could do with all these articulations here. Just the RX alone, as I will demonstrate later, have so much content in them and so many different sample sets. And that's why it's a big library as well. If you ever wonder what to do with the library and you sort of need some help, click the little icon up here. You'll get a clear map here of all the individual features in the library and what we've assigned the different CCs to. You can always change that if you want to do that yourself. And another aspect of Century that I love, and is actually something that we started doing even back to Anthology, is that you can really, really quickly build your own patch. So let's say that, for example, we have legato here, but I want to be able to key switch to staccatissimo, and then I want some trills maybe here, and let's take some triple tongues here, and let's do some arcs here, and let's do some muted brass down here. You already built your own patch here. Everything is assigned to key switches automatically, and you can also change them at your will. And that's how quickly it is to build patches. Let's go over here to the Cimbasso as well. Beautiful instrument and often overlooked in sampling as well. It's just lying subtly behind the rest of the brass here. Let me play the flugel and the French horn and the Cimbasso together here so you can hear them in context. But it can also do more than just two notes here. Let me play a little bit of freestyle with it here. Do not underestimate the Cimbasso. Towards the end of the demo, I'm also playing with the solo trumpet from Century Solo Brass here, and this is a whopper. Let's just take a look here at the articulations to begin with. You got staccattissimos, marcatos, different types of soaring arcs, and they're actually both with and without vibrato, and at multiple lengths and multiple velocities. Again, we have several sample sets built into the arcs here, so they're a lot easier to use. You got double tongue, triple tongue, also recorded in velocities and with different speed controls, legato, sustains with vibrato, flutter tongue, trills. Multiple arcs here, again, not just soaring arcs. These are a little more dramatic. These are more traditional arcs. You got crescendos, sforzando, long crescendos, and again, these also have speed controls and different sample sets. You have a whole wealth of muted sample sets from staccato, different types of soaring arcs here again, sustains, staccatissimo. Other types of soaring arcs here, crescendos, using different types of mutes. There's 2 different mutes in the library on the trumpet as well. And another lovely aspect of it is that the vibrato control is intense in this one. If you go all the way up, you can pretty much do mariachi trumpet. So that's with the vibrato turned all the way up down here. Let me try to turn it down a bit, and you get a more sort of pure classic trumpet sound. Dynamics, expression, speed, vibrato control, all smooth. And the smoothness, and the reason it's been taking 3 years to do Century, we've gotten a lot of like, guys, come on, release this thing, is that it takes a long time to make sure the samples react in a more smooth way. That's what you get with Century. And in solo brass, it's really the ultimate test, really, because you're just listening to a singular instrument. Is it capable or not? And in this case, it is. And that's one of the reasons that it's been taking so long to do this library. And there are hundreds and hundreds of people involved. I wish I could thank all of you guys, editors and programmers and conductors and musicians and contractors and studios and halls and so many different people. Like, we had at a point over 20 editors just working on Century alone. So it gives you an idea about like how big these productions are. And again, it's not just solo brass, it's also ensemble brass, it's also regular strings, it's sordino strings, it's harps, it's ostinato, and a variety of other future libraries that we have planned for the Century collection. So it's really a step forward for us, and this is the 6th time we've recorded a full symphony orchestra. And while this video is certainly dedicated to solo brass for the most part, let me also just give you a brief peek into our Century sordino violins. Century actually comes with both traditional strings and sordino strings, both deep sample collections. In this case here, we're going to be listening to the short arcs with a decrease on them here. I've turned the speed knob all the way up, meaning that it's triggering the sample set that's the longest. And you're just going to be hearing these beautiful violins, and I'll add the violas to it as well so you can hear how well they play together. Super simple. This is just playing on the keyboard in typical piano fashion, triggering the arcs here. And then for certain parts here, adding some ornamentation with both legato and sustains here. But for the most part, this is just arcs playing. And those legatos are so sweet. So that was a little bit of the second violins for sordino. I also used the violas here, and these are not the sordino violas, but these are traditional violas. One of the great tricks, and this is often overlooked as well, many people ask for this sort of Newman sound, how you really get that silky, beautiful sound. And the truth is that most of the time in sessions, you'll be using half mutes and half non-mutes. So in this case, I used mutes for the second violins here, and then I added the violas, and again, also using viola arcs here on top of each other. And then you get that beautiful mixture where you have a little bit of the silkiness from the sordinos, but also a little bit of this more traditional sound of regular strings on top of it, and just creates this beautiful mixture of them. Let me just play this last part here. It's a fairly simple arrangement, but in context, it really works well. And context is important. You can also see here I have a little bit from the Century basses on top of it. But let me take you through this first part here, and let's talk a little more about what actually goes on in terms of other instruments as well. Obviously, there's a little more than just strings and brass playing. The first part here is actually our harps. We have Century harps coming out, and this is a massive collection of dual harps, meaning that we deep sample 2 different harps separately. And each of them have different characters, but you can do the whole John Williams thing where you pan one to the left, pan one to the right, and do glissandos. We have a wealth of glissandos recorded at any scale you can think of, at any tempo and any dynamic you can think of. But the harps are beautiful, and as you can see here, they're pretty dominant here in the first part. Just keep an ear out for the harps here in the first part. We also have these beautiful glockenspiels, and this is another little trick that I like to do. One thing is using normal glockenspiels. I'm never happy with how they sound. They sort of have a toy-like sound to them, but when it comes to Age, our acoustic grand ensembles, we recorded 7 glockenspiels playing together, and for me, this is the sound of glocks that I want. They're more full and rich, they sit better in the mix, they're more of a real instrument comparatively to the other ones, and it's not just a little childish thing in the background. They have some substance to them, so I'll just isolate them here briefly. Also used a little bit of the guitar tremolos from Age here that create this beautiful sort of textural vibe on top of the strings. One thing that I like to do is to add a little more pulse drive to the compositions, and we have a variety of libraries that does that. And in this case, I'm both using the shakers from the auxiliary percussion and the Kaiser drum here, just to create a little more texture, particularly in the high end of the frequency spectrum, the rhythmic spectrum, where you want those tick-tocky sounds. There's no clocks in this composition, but these guys do the trick as well. And I personally like to have a little more organic feel, which is why I tend to use the shakers a lot. And the beautiful thing about the shakers here is that they're velocity based. They're naturally played, but you can actually crossfade between velocities when you play them here. They may not sound like a lot, but you put them in context to the composition and you really get something much more full and rich. Let me continue the piece from here. You probably also heard a little bit of a choir. This is coming from our Lacrimosa or Imperium choirs here. These are called multivowels, and these are sung vowels, very short phrases, and there's dozens of different ones. You can create your own ones, but in this one, I want a particular one that was S pronounced. Check out how real they sound. And they're also cool because they're velocity based. So you don't just get your standard phrase, but you can actually play them from soft to hard. And that helps. Let me just play the demo one more time in its entirety here, and I thank you so much for watching. This is a massive milestone for Colin and I. This has been over 3 years in production, and we're looking, I think just this first chapter of Century is over 400 gigabytes, and that's compressed, so we're a little over a terabyte of content. Sometimes you have to go all the way, sometimes you have to go deep, but this is not just deep sampling like we envisioned in the beginning. This is deep sampling, but with true emotion and expressiveness to it, like we always wanted it. So anyway, this could become a very long video. Let me just play it one more time in its entirety here, and check out all the other videos we have on the website. We actually have individual demos for each of the solo brass instruments here as well. So if you want to learn more about them in detail and hear what they're capable of, we have all that for you as well. And we have another tutorial where I'm just demonstrating the solo brass in their naked nature as well. This is obviously a walkthrough using a variety of other instruments as well, but I hope it serves as sort of an inspirational insight into how to use the 8DO products. Thanks so much for watching. This is Troels signing out.